Day 279 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is a quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And as always, I'll start off with the Russian losses. So as of the 29th of November, in the last 24-hour reporting period, there has been an additional 480 Russian military personnel losses. Then when we take a look at the hardware, so armoured combat vehicles, an additional 5, tanks 3, artillery 2, and 2 aircraft as well. Then we'll move back to the map and start out today in Belarus for a moment, where the Russian army has transferred 15 Tor M2 air defense systems and 10 engineering vehicles as well into Belarus. Now, just of note, the Tor M2s are really only designed for air defenses. I'd otherwise be probably a little bit more concerned if Russia sent, say, a couple of hundred S-300 air defense systems, which do have this really rudimentary and inaccurate land attack capability, sort of like indiscriminate shelling of civilian regions. So none of that exists, and that wasn't sent. So yeah, always just better to see in that light. Then to Russia itself on the map. So we've actually got some satellite images here from yesterday at Engels Base in Savtova. Now that is a little bit more center, or should I say south, of Russia there. And the actual satellite imagery shows some apparent preparations of Russian Tu-95 and Tu-160 aircraft that are in this case designed for short and long range missile airstrikes. Now at a glance, some of you might be thinking this looks like a whole bunch of aircraft carriers, but it's rather just cropped out images here. And the importance of all this is that Russia is likely gearing up for another large-scale missile strike or salvo soon, particularly officially on Ukrainian power infrastructure. Oh, and speaking of Russia, they are bringing back out the old stuff. So we've received a photo here of a column of T-62 tanks, reportedly on the move somewhere in Zaporizhzhia Krai, which is on the other side of Russia almost completely. In fact, it's getting pretty close to the Sea of Japan. So Russia is continuing to deplete its military hardware on that side of the country. And for this 3-day war, which to me means so much for Russia having a defensive force against China in that region. Oh, but also with this photo, check out the dynamic protection on these tanks, also known as soft armor. They are rectangular looking bricks on the body of the tanks, really an aftermarket component, which is additional reactive tank armor specifically designed for anti-tank weapons. But of course, we've already found that the US supplied Javelin anti-tank missiles with their top-down attack vector capability have largely rendered these soft armor additions or additional levels of protection practically useless. Then we'll move across to Ukraine, and in particular in the Donbass, where the Russian forces are trying to advance in 3 directions, distinct regions of the area, including Yampil, Bakhmut, and the Andriivka directions there. Although, contrastingly, they were on the defensive in most other regions in the Donbass today. And with these offensive attacks, mostly in the central region here, they were mostly repelled. Although Russia did announce that they captured the frontline settlement of Spern. If I can load in and find it there, it's just on, there it is, so right there. But that in fact turned out to be verifiably false, and was perhaps just announced to be a morale booster for Wagner and other Russian soldiers in that region. Then moving down the map more specifically now, where Bakhmut holds, and the Russian forces are really looking to take it from the south axis at the moment. But they've been unsuccessful there, so at Ivanrad, for instance. So they've even gone further south of Bakhmut to Andriivka, where they actually took some ground here today in the last 24-hour reporting period. Now, using the scale on the map, I've calculated that it's roughly 1 square mile of land taken. And it really is quite the stalemate, or more of a push-pull scenario in this region in the last bit of time. Then we'll move across to Zaporizhzhia, for instance, just regarding the power plant there. So in light of recent news, Russia's Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, has denied that the Russian forces are leaving the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Now earlier, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant officials there noticed signs of Russian forces leaving, including packing up equipment and looting basically anything that wasn't nailed down. But as the old saying goes, nothing is ever confirmed until the Russian government denies it. Then moving a little bit further down in the same region of Zaporizhzhia, so the Ukrainian forces struck and damaged a railway bridge in this area here, and I'll just see if I can find it. That was of course used for Russian logistical forces to supply. And Russian forces really hate when this happens, as the Russian war machine relies heavily on the railways for supplies. So the existing infrastructure of a completely separate sovereign country, they want to use that infrastructure. Oh, and all of that happened right here, so I've found it. So next to the settlement of Kamianska. So in fact, if we zoom in, the satellite quality isn't great in this region, but we'll see it right there. So the white does indicate the railway line, bit of a river there as well, the Moloshana River. But all in all, this makes it quite difficult for the Russian army to supply its southern and southwestern offensive, which leads me on to the Kherson region right next door. So in Kherson, in the last 24 hours, several explosions have been reported, including at the Chaplinka airport right here, and also Skadovsk, which is sort of basically starting to hit the Black Sea there. But also, Ukrainian forces hit and destroyed a Russian ammunition depot in occupied Radensk as well, which isn't too far away from the front line there. And it's thrown me all off. I'll try that again. Let's see. Now, all of these locations that I've just mentioned are within range of so many Ukrainian weapon systems these days. People will say it's HIMARS, but it could have been a great many things these days. Either way, high precision guided munitions. Then we'll move across to the news today in a slightly shorter video. So the ministers of foreign affairs from Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden are in Kyiv today. So the capital of Ukraine. So nearly all Scandinavian and Baltic state countries coming together in a joint statement saying that they stand in full solidarity with Ukraine. They said they are committed to supporting the country in the face of Russian aggression, including providing further military and humanitarian aid. Then in some more news, the first 152mm shells of in-house Ukrainian production have started to be produced and supplied to the Ukrainian army now. Now this is good news, as the 152mm caliber Soviet-era shells used for the Soviet howitzers and SPGs that are deployed in the Ukrainian army are something that the West rarely produces. I think maybe Bulgaria and a few others do, but and the reason for that, of course, is because the West, NATO, uses the preferred 155 caliber munitions platforms instead. And to me, it's all very reminiscent of a famous Zelensky quote from earlier this year. But I'd like to think that Russia had said the exact opposite type of quote at least a few times during this war now as well. Then we'll move across to funny for the day, so just a quick one-ish. Here we see the process of newly mobilized Russian conscripts training to use all of Russia's finest equipment. Russia's finest 1960s and 70s Soviet-era equipment, that is. For instance, on the left, we have the Grad 1 MLRS system from the 70s, which is in fact on an older chassis, the ZIL chassis. I believe it's the ZIL 131 1960s chassis. Then on the bottom right, we have no shortage of the T-62 tanks from the 60s as well. Then we have the on the top right, the 122mm Russian D30 howitzers, again from the 60s as well. In fact, that one was developed in the 50s and started to be deployed in exactly 1960. So all in all, it's quite the 1960s and 70s Russian military bonanza. And yes, I can see Ukraine uses some 1960s, 70s, and so on stuff there too, which they have maintained a lot better than Russia. But Ukraine certainly complements their hardware with a lot more modern NATO hardware too. Oh, and one last thing for this funny, and something I didn't expect. Some Russians are in white camo gear to blend into the environment. I'm impressed. Oh, but wait a second. Let's zoom in here. That's not white winter camo on cotton. That is almost literally those single $1 single use only splash ponchos like the ones I used on my Niagara Falls boat tour. So just when I want to give Russia some credit, they don't even let me. And I dare say those things are going to rip and tear pretty easily too. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, and I do hope to see all of you guys there on the next one. Cheers.